Hey guys, welcome back to the Sweet Truth Podcast. I'm joined today by Amanda Amadei.
Hi.
Amanda is a yoga instructor, spiritual leader in the community, and she's also recently just begun a yoga certification course up here in the Hudson Valley, which we are all very excited about. So Amanda, tell me, first start with the certification course. What got you into that? What made you want to do something like that?
Well, first of all, I love the Sweet Truth. Good name.
Thank you.
Good name. Totally suits it. And so basically, I've been a practitioner of yoga for a really long time. I'd say about, 26 years now. And I've realized in the last 5 or 10 years that my favorite thing to do is training other teachers, which is what this certification program is. It's a base level 200-hour program so that people can be certified to be yoga teachers. Although I do have to say, more than half of the people that take these courses don't really have any desire to go on and teach. They just really want to immerse themselves in the entire practice of yoga, not just the bendy postures on the mat, but all of it involved.
So they want to know more than just the average student. They want to feel capable of being able to even just instruct themselves, even if they're just doing their own solo practice.
Absolutely. A home practice is oftentimes a big motivation for people to do a teacher training because my own teacher was just talking about this the other day. People say, okay, I'm gonna do my own yoga practice at home, and they get on their mat and go, well, I don't really know what to do, or like where to start. And even to say just do what feels right can feel really overwhelming because you feel aimless, right? And I think the other part of it is that the asana is, in the grand scheme of things, such a small portion of the practice of yoga. The asana being what are the postures. The physical postures are called the asana.
Okay.
And there's obviously a whole lot more to it than that.
Let's start with the asana. Those are the postures, right?
Correct. Asana is just another word for posture. So if you were to say tree pose, it would be vrikshasana. So when you hear these long Sanskrit words in yoga practice, asana practice, that's all they are. It's the Sanskrit name of the pose followed by the word asana.
Okay.
So that's what makes it sound like, pig Latin sometimes.
Wow. All right. I've learned something just now.
See?
All right, great. So, but you said that it's so much more than that.
Absolutely.
And I'd love to get your perspective on that,
Sure.
for all of our budding yoga instructors or anybody that's trying to get into yoga right now. It's an incredible practice. It's so good for your mind and body. I highly recommend it. My mom, I say that because my mom was a yoga instructor and owned
For a
her
long
own studio
time,
for many years.
That's
and
awesome.
we were very proud of her, and she imparted those benefits to me. So I'd like to hear your perspective on all that stuff.
Cool. So, I guess it's a broad, big question, right?
Sure.
But
There must be something you tell your students, though.
I think that's a good place to start, right? People, when they think of yoga, especially since the invent of social media, think of these wild pretzel-y gymnastics type of postures, or they think of very stereotypical, what we call like the Lululemon look kind of thing, It's the fitness model, young, skinny, white, able-bodied girl in her 20s who's perkily popping up into a handstand, and they're like, well, I can't do that, so I can't do yoga. And it's like, well, that's not yoga, so you don't have to worry about it.
Right.
But essentially, when thousands of years ago, all this stuff started out, before we even got to the type of yoga that I practice and teach, which is vinyasa yoga, which just means like a flow, if you've heard the term vinyasa flow. Mm-hmm. Before that, it was meditation. It was seated meditation, which I know is a lot of what you talk about here on the Sweet Truth.
I had no idea.
Yeah, so yoga is comprised, I'll back up a little bit. Yoga is comprised of 8 limbs. So you've heard of the 8-limbed approach.
I've heard of it in passing. Yeah.
And only one of those 8 is asana.
Okay.
Right?
Wow.
So the rest have to do with your breath, with the way you behave in the world, your relationship to yourself. And when it comes down to the last three limbs, it's essentially concentration, meditation, and enlightenment.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
So in the original scriptures about all of this, for example, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, they don't really talk about asana. Asana was just sitting cross-legged in a posture, getting your butt on the mat to try and meditate. And people realized over the course of years that if you just sit and meditate, not only are you antsy, but you don't live long enough to reach enlightenment if you don't move your body.
Okay.
That's what I've always taken from it. So it's like it's gonna take some years till you can not only meditate, let alone meditate to any other state of mind. So we need to move our bodies around and move the energy through and take care of all of these lines of energy, what are called the nadis, in order to settle the body and the mind enough that we can sit and concentrate and meditate.
Wow.
So really
Wow,
you can
yeah.
think of all of this, all these postures and everything as a way to kind of get the antsiness out so you can sit your butt down and meditate.
That makes perfect sense to me because, the first thing I believe is that the body it's the vessel, it's everything.
Mm-hmm.
If the body's out of sorts, there's no meditation going on anyway.
No, this is like you said, our vessel, right?
Right, yeah. If you're in pain...
Work with it or get it out of the way.
Right, yeah.
Yep.
If you're not taking care of it, you're going to be in pain. If you're in pain and uncomfortable, you're not sitting quietly and going inward. You are constantly with this broken down vessel that you haven't been taking care of.
Although I do have to say, not to interrupt you, but
Please.
big difference between pain and discomfort.
Okay. Oh, would you
I think,
like to expound
well,
on
I'm
that?
sure that as somebody that practices meditation, it's not comfortable. We're never like, maybe once in a while you're like, oh, that felt really good. And then you're like, oh, crap, I lost it, right?
Yeah, right.
So a lot of yoga and meditation, they're one and the same, part of the same school of thought, is getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. That's a big, huge component of it. Pain is completely different, right? Like pain, especially in the physical asana practice, pain is like hard no,
Mm-hmm.
hard stop.
Right, we got a problem.
Discomfort is like, that's interesting. Let me just stay right here where I can tolerate it and see what comes up for me.
Well said.
That's the part
That's
people
really
don't
well
like.
said. Yeah. Yeah, I remember, I don't know who it is, but there's a quote that's like, you're not doing yoga until you're like desperate to stop to get out of the pose.
The pose starts when you want to get out of it,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah, that's it. Yeah. Which I think is that should be across the board for all of our experiences as people is like, you're not really living until you're sort of pushing yourself to that edge of like, all right, I'm outside my comfort zone. I don't really love this, but
This is waking me up.
Yeah, let me just sit here for a little bit longer than I would. I want to get out of here. I want to be comfy, but there might be something new here. And if I just sit long enough in this discomfort, maybe I'll learn something, I'll get something, I'll grow. Growth is pain, always. That's another part of my tenets of belief that is just never changing. Is that growth is always painful.
It's never going to be
always
comfortable to
discomfort.
grow.
Yeah. So it's just a fascinating concept to be sort of going after discomfort and not being shy from it and being ready to meet it and not be thinking of it as necessarily a challenge, but as something that's more of a gift, And
it's not a permanent state. I think that's something that this practice teaches me over and over again is that no thought or feeling or sensation is permanent, right? Until you're done, until you're dead. And so usually if you can it doesn't have to be a form of self-torture, right? We're not getting on our mat to be like, this is good for you. You should be suffering the whole time. It's not like, I was raised Roman Catholic. I had enough of the suffer
guilt,
for your own good kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it's more of like, what happens if you just stay one more breath, right? What if you just stay just a little bit longer than you want to before you run away from it, right? And so just like showing up on your cushion or wherever you sit to meditate, you just show up on your mat. And if you have the right teacher or you have been trained as a teacher, then you can fall into a rhythm. I like the rhythm of vinyasa yoga for that purpose. And you start to breathe. You start to breathe and move your body and get out of your head a little bit. And so the moments arise where you're uncomfortable, but you're not miserable the entire time.
Right, right. Yeah, it's funny. I one of my like big tips for people that are meditating is like feel your body. Like don't worry about, floating around in your head. Just feel your body. If you can feel the blood pumping, feel the muscles in the face moving up and down or whatever they're doing, feel where the tension's going. You're meditating already. You're already stepping out of who you think you are and you are living somewhere else. And the body, all you have to do is pay attention to it. And yoga is a constant paying attention to that body.
It really is. I mean, that's so exactly true. I love what you just said about, just paying attention to your body and like the present moment, and you are meditating, right?
Mm-hmm.
The biggest thing that you hear from everybody is like, I don't think I'm doing it right. I'm doing it wrong, right? Like to this day, like I'll sit down to meditate in the morning and I'm like, I don't even know if that counted, right? Like my brain was in a million different places. Or I show up in my practice and it's a struggle or things are achy, or it's, stirring up emotions that you're like, well, where'd that come from? Now I'm angry or I'm anxious or, tears come out on the mat all the time. So I think the misconception of both meditation and yoga together is that there's some sort of bliss state that we all arrive at, and that's when you're doing it right.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Right.
And I mean,
right.
you and me both know you don't sit down and just, I will now clear my mind. It's like,
that's crazy.
That's not happening.
Anybody that thinks they're going to clear their mind is out of their mind.
Then maybe the Dalai Lama.
The mind does not clear. It can't. Its job is to find patterns, find problems, and create solutions to those problems.
Exactly.
It does that perfectly. It's actually
it's very good.
The mind is fascinating because it works so well. When it gets out of control is when we think it's all of us. That
yes.
It's the one in charge. We should follow it, listen to everything it's saying. It's like a computer that you can use as a tool, but it is not the driver. It is not the you. It is not the thing in charge of the whole operation. And so when we think it is, it takes over and it's like, you should be worried about that. Be worried about that. Be worried about that. And when you meditate, you're like, okay, hold on. You're the helper. You're not the guy in charge here.
Exactly. You're the elephant, not the rider.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I wanted to ask you more about how you incorporate those 8 limbs more into your personal practice and the way you teach your students.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So not to go down like a whole educational rabbit hole, because
when we can always come back and have another interview as well and go through all that stuff. Yeah.
But just to like kind of tick through the 8 limbs, you start with the first 2 are what are called the yamas and the niyamas, which are just, if you're familiar with like the 10 Commandments or, even like some people would say like the Bill of Rights, it's like your basic fundamental non-harming, non-stealing, non-lying,
just
non-hoarding.
Yeah.
And then the niyamas go into a little bit more of your relationship to yourself, things like discipline and self-study, things like that. And then you get into breath, pranayama, asana, which is the physical postures and practice. The 5th is something that is basically like a withdrawal of your senses. It's like starting to draw your awareness inward. And then 5 is when you actually start to concentrate, 6 is starting to concentrate, 7 is actually meditating, and 8 is that enlightenment or nirvana.
Wow.
Right? So it makes it sound like there's a finish line. But we all know you basically get glimpses of that from time to time. One of my favorite books by Jack Kornfield is called Is it Enlightenment? I think it's first the Enlightenment, then the laundry. It's basically like you can go on retreat, you can sit and do your meditation, but you still have to take care of the nuts and bolts of your life.
Right.
And so I think that incorporating yoga or meditation together into your life has to be realistic about that.
For example, let's say that you have a class today, right?
Okay.
you can't do all of those limbs in one class.
Right.
But what's your practical way of like keeping touch? You know, do you do like maybe today is just one limb, or I'm going to give you this limb and these two others? How do you like practically infuse that into a class? Just one class. You've
That's
got
a
an
really
hour.
good question.
You've just got an hour.
Right.
know?
You've got an hour, and it's modern vinyasa yoga. Right. These
And
aren't people living in an ashram with, you know, everyone has jobs and lives and kids and families.
They got to pick up their kids. They
Yeah.
have no time. They got to go grocery shopping.
And they're
Yeah.
trying desperately to carve this time out for themselves and then not think about all that other crap while they're doing this anyway, right?
And you're their teacher, and they're looking to you just for something they can take with them, you know?
Right. So I think starting with that point right there, as a teacher, you have to be willing to be honest and vulnerable about the fact that you're in the same boat, right? People will be like, oh, you're a yoga teacher. You must be like, oh, I don't want to get upset in front of you. You must be so zen. And it's like, yeah, right. It's more of the willingness to be honest of we're all just good people doing our best, you know? And I think the biggest thing as a teacher that you have to remember is you can't teach all of the things in every class. You can't even teach all of the things about one posture.
Right.
In a class, let alone an entire limb of an ancient philosophy of yoga, right? So you pick, the way I design my classes and my work with my private clients is to pick a theme either from the philosophy or a specific body part, sometimes a specific posture specifically like to work up to, like a goal pose kind of thing, and work backwards.
Okay.
You know, and sometimes I usually start with a Dharma talk, which is just like a little couple minutes at the beginning where I'd either read a passage from a book or introduce a concept or share an anecdote from my own life of something that exemplifies a yoga concept.
Right. Story. Right? Yeah, it's funny because story really is what gets people drawn in. You know?
Absolutely.
They don't really... They really don't, you know, people like to learn things. They sure do. But man, do they become excited when there's a question and sort of like a story and a person going through something they can relate to.
Absolutely.
And I just think that's a genius way to teach is through story.
It really is. You're right. I mean, that idea of storytelling does always pull us in. And it makes us feel less like we're being talked at.
Right. Like, here's the information, remember it.
Right. If I sat down with you at each class and was like, these are the 8 limbs of yoga, and now I want you to memorize these, and this is how you define each word in Sanskrit, you'd be like, oh my gosh, this is horrible,
yeah,
right? But if I come in and I'm like, let me tell you this story, like this morning in my class, let me tell you this story about how I was dealing with some stuff with my website and trying to deal with the help desk chat thing, and then I realized it was an AI bot that I was communicating with, and I got so angry. And it's like, people can relate to that, right? And so then you take it into, so what do you do with your anger? And what do you do with your anger once you get onto the yoga mat or the meditation cushion, right? If you just pretend it's not there, that's not helpful. If you smush it down, that's not helpful. If you let it come out sideways and rage at people, that's not helpful. Like, what is helpful? Where do we put this? Where do we take our full experience of humanity and bring that honestly onto the mat so that this becomes a helpful tool as opposed to a chore or one more thing we're supposed to be doing?
I think that's such a great thing, especially for a teacher. You know, some people are looking for someone with all the answers, and those people are going to be...
If you find that person, I would love to meet them. That'd be really helpful.
But those people will always be searching for answers, and they'll never truly find them. But a lot of people come to realize that what they really want is somebody that reminds them of themselves, that they can relate to.
Yeah.
And a good teacher, I think, is someone who is honestly relatable, is 100% saying, I don't have the answers. I'm flawed, but what I am is a presence for you to gather around, and for all of us to gather around and try to do what's best for our bodies, do what's best for our minds. You know, a lot of people don't have the confidence or the energy to gather people to say, come here, we're going to join together, I'm going to lead us.
It's not in everyone's nature.
Right.
Some people are like, oh, hell no.
It's scary.
Right.
It's really scary to put yourself out there and to ask people to be with you. But when someone gracious and thoughtful does that, and they choose to relate instead of to stand above, I find that those people, I'm enthralled. I want to be in that presence. You know, you want to be in that gravitational pull, and everyone else starts to feel the same way, and they feel like they could do it. You know, like you're empowering people by being a teacher rather than instructing them. You know, of course, there's place for instruction. I understand that.
Right. You don't want people getting hurt.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think that's what I love so much about training yogis to be teachers, is helping them find their own unique voice. Because depending on your background, your age, your gender identity, the body you exist in, all of these things contribute to your own unique perspective on life and what you bring into your practice. And at the heart of the yoga practice is this concept, is that it's not about self-improvement, it's self-study.
Wow.
Right? So it's not like you are in this training program or in this class or learning from this teacher in order to improve yourself and become this thing. It's more, you're going to sit here and get to really know yourself and find your own voice so that you can be true to yourself. And then you're not swimming upstream all the time.
Wow. That's incredible. I've never heard it put like that, honestly.
That, to me, first time I heard that, took a lot of the pressure off. I was
Really?
like, oh, okay, that I can do. And who doesn't want to, self-study, think more about themselves? I mean, you trick them in that way, and then you're like, oh, no, you got to look at the other stuff, too.
You got to pull them
look
in
at all
somehow,
of it.
you know?
Yeah.
Got to get them in somehow.
But, yeah, there's a great Sanskrit term. It's svadhyaya. That's self-study.
Self-study.
Yep.
Svadhyaya.
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 Yep, there you go. Svadhyaya.
Self-study. I love that.
Yep,
Oh,
self-study.
That's awesome. I'm going to have to research that.
That's a good one.
Well, that's beautiful. So I want to go back now.
Okay.
And I want to talk about what growing up led you in this direction. Were you always a spiritual person? Did you find this later in life? Tell me about where it sort of all began for you.
Well, the movement part always started early for me. I was a dancer growing up, ballet, modern, tap dancing, like you
Wow.
name it, loved it. All the way up till high school. Got into theater, and then went into college for theater and fell in love with what's called stage combat, which is basically like, I mean, you're a D&D guy, right?
I love it. Yeah.
Sword fighting, stunt work, combat, that kind
Cool
of
stuff. Yeah.
Just love it. To this day, still absolutely love it. But one of the things that we had to do as part of the theater program, and with this focus on the physicality of theater, was essentially yoga, right? So I was raised in the Roman Catholic Church. My family's Italian, and I had to go to church on Sundays and so forth. But that had never resonated very strongly with me. And so when I was drawn into yoga, it wasn't really for the spiritual thing either. It was literally a class that I had to show up to every morning at 9 a.m. And, I'm 19 years old at this point.
Wow.
Probably hungover a good, third of the time in college, right? But we had to go in. They called it dynamics because I don't think they could technically say that we were taking yoga for a college credit. So it was like the physical warm-up for the theater
Interesting.
studio.
Was that a legal reason? Was it a moral reason?
I don't really know, actually. Maybe just for the curriculum at a major university. This was the University of Illinois, big old Big Ten school.
Okay.
So maybe yoga wouldn't really fly in that way. So we had to show up for this class, and we would learn a sequence each semester. And so we'd spend the first few weeks like learning this, and then as the semester went on, you'd come in every morning in silence, and once everyone was there, you would start your sequence, and everyone would go at their own pace, and it usually took like 40 minutes. And then when you were finished, you'd be finished in seated meditation or lying down, and the vocal teacher would come in, right? What happened for me is I started with this physicality, and I was like, I'm 19 years old, I'm strong, I'm young, I'm able-bodied. I'm like, this is great. And then the breathing started, the having to breathe while you're moving part.
Oh, yeah.
And
that's right.
I I realized I had not been breathing my whole life. Like I
Wow.
got so nauseous that I'm not kidding you. This is not like a great endorsement. This is not a great endorsement for yoga, but because I had never like relaxed this like gut of steel, like this tension in my body, and relaxed all of that and breathed in and let that oxygen in, it made me woozy. And so every single morning for almost a year and a half of this, I would have to leave the room at some point and was like dry heaving.
For a year and a half.
Because I had to go to the class. So I would do what I could, and then every morning I'd be like, oh, and go run it and come back and finish and grit through. And I still credit that instructor, his name was Robin McFarquhar, held space like a good teacher does, and was like, just basically like a shrug. He was a British dude, so he was basically like, I don't know what to tell you, just like hang in there. And eventually I came out the other side. And I really think it saved my life in a way.
Really?
Because I was so liberated from, with dance, you hold everything in and up and in. And I had not the greatest childhood. And there's like that protective armor of trauma and growing up. And having a way to let go of that softened me in a way that allowed me to actually live my life, and has changed everything about my life since that time. I didn't end up staying with theater. I stayed with Fight for another like 10 years after college, but stuck with yoga. And then it was like 12 years ago now, I realized teaching yoga was something that interested me. But up until that point, it was very, very personal. It was very much, I got some stuff to work through on my mat. And therefore, everyone that steps onto their mat in one of my classes or with me, I have tremendous compassion and patience for, because things come up when you breathe. And that is so much scarier than trying to learn how to do the splits, right?
Right.
We do those things because, you need to be able to move your body in certain ways, but also because you go right up to that edge and it's going to stir some things up. And if you take a deep, deep breath in that place, the tears flow and the anxiety comes up. That for me, that was my start. I realized it's a pretty extreme example.
You know what? I don't think it is, because I think people aren't aware of how powerful the breath is and how often we hold it tight, and our breath is super measured and tense. So the first things I started realizing after, my mom always taught me about breath when doing yoga, but I didn't really understand what she was talking about. I was too young and I hadn't had that experience yet. And I just sort of did yoga and maybe breathed, and I was like, whatever, I don't know. I'm not a master at this. But then I started...
Nobody is.
Yeah. But then I started meditating, and that's when I started realizing because I was slipping into my body and watching my lungs and watching my breath, I could start to see how held back it was, and like how often I'd be holding it in, like holding it. Like my body is, I don't even know why it's doing it, but it's just like locked down, clamped, and it won't let me get a full breath. And I'm like, why am I not breathing? Why am I not breathing? And I started to realize it was like working in conjunction with thoughts. So there'd be thoughts about things I'm nervous about, things I've been maybe had trauma about, things that I don't want to think about, any sort of anxiety or worry. If it's there, if it's right in front of my awareness, I'm looking at it and I'm grabbing onto it and I'm like, oh, I have to deal with this. That's when the body would go, and there'd be no movement of breath at all.
And that's exactly what happens. Like if you feel fear, if somebody startles you, what's your breath do? You go,
yeah,
right? It's like, but our brain doesn't realize that it's the same damn thing.
Right.
Right. And so we don't realize we're holding our breath.
It's just fascinating to see that there's this mechanism of flow that the body naturally engages in. And when and the pain and the fear that we carry with us completely interferes with it.
Or rides
Blocks it
that
right
wave.
up.
Yeah.
And you can't, some people, I'm just fascinated all the time by how many times a day I catch myself not breathing. And I'm like,
same.
yeah, it
I
still
mean, to this
happens.
day, you're still, I'm like, oh my God. I always laugh. My partner, Nora, will be sitting there and she's like, what's going on, babe? She's like, I don't know. I'm like, are you breathing? She goes, nope. Nope, wasn't doing that. And it's so,
Right.
it brings humor into it because half the time that it helps. Not half the time. It always helps, but half the time you don't realize that's what would help so much.
Some of my friends who I've sort of helped, I guess you could call it babysitting or something, when they've had their first meditative experiences and it's something they're opposed to, they don't want to do it, they have a lot of trauma and anxiety, and I understand that, and I'm like, that's fine, I'll just sit with you and you give it a shot. And when stuff comes up and they start to be like, I don't know, man, I can't do this. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Just let's try it one more time, but this time just breathe. And if it comes up, just take a big old inhale and then take a big old exhale. And everyone tells you just breathe. That's like a common,
It's
thing.
like on mugs.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yes.
It is. It's everywhere, but I don't think we understand its magic. We don't understand its power. And when you breathe in, you literally create new space around you. You enter the new moment. The moment that you weren't entering because you were back here with all this anxiety, you breathe into the next moment where that anxiety can pass. Basically what I found was that when I'm not breathing, I'm falling very slowly backwards in time. And
Yes.
the present moment's moving like this, and I'm back here still trying to deal with whatever anxiety or trauma I'm holding on to. And it's all the way back here, and I can see I'm like drowning, and the present moment is over here like, hey, bud, you coming back? And when I breathe, I whoop right back into the
So
present
the inhale
moment.
for you is what brings you back.
Yeah. And then,
Yeah.
of course, the exhale, you let go of everything, and then back to the inhale again. But
Yeah.
that's been my experience.
Yeah, I think that's a really beautiful way to put it. I like that that visual of like bringing yourself back, because that for me is a lot of what I see when I am meditating. It's like I feel like my brain is either past or future, right? It starts going, and you go, oh wait, hang on, bring it back. Ah, crap! Now why am I thinking about that? Bring it back. Like that is literally all meditation for me tends to be, is like bring it back, bring it back, bring it back.
Right.
you know, and it's hard. It is really scary those first times that you sit, if you're not used to being still and quiet with yourself. It's terrifying. And having somebody to guide you through the practice, whether it's yoga or meditation, makes it less scary and less lonely. It also grounds you in the present moment where those things are not happening. It's like, in the example of trauma, your whatever techniques that you used, your coping mechanisms to deal with it, you needed those, right? That got you through at the time. Having somebody there to remind you that that's not where you are right now, right? Like that is not happening right now. Right now, you're safe. And if you can do that, like you said, for one breath, then you start there. And then if you have to say, all right, man, I can't do this, it's like, all right, cool. And then you come back when you're ready.
Right.
But
this goes back to that presence thing we were talking about. How a teacher, is more than just an instructor. They're a presence. They're a place. Like you said, he made space for you when you were having a hard time, and he could keep you grounded in the moment. You didn't flee because you had a place to go. You had a place to weather the storm.
yes.
And
Yeah.
it is so important to be okay with accepting help. You don't need to self-actualize and become someone incredible all on your own. That's not healthy, and it's not necessary.
It's not even practical.
It's not practical. We're all here with each other.
Well, and back to that idea of that's not what you're trying to improve and become somebody different anyway. You're
Right.
trying to be okay with yourself,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
Which is so much easier said than done.
Well said. Yeah. So
Yeah.
So you finally found your breath.
I
right?
did.
And that was in college?
Yeah, that was my last 2 years of college.
Okay.
So 2021.
So then what happened moving forward from there?
So I started taking just regular group classes. I had some pretty tumultuous years right after I graduated college. My father died very suddenly this summer after I graduated. I'm sorry, the fall after I graduated, that September. He had a heart attack. And so that shock and trauma was in me. And at the same time, I started to come to the realization of coming out to myself that I was gay, and was living with my boyfriend at the time. Wonderful, wonderful human. And I remember I also lost the crappy day job that I was working at. And so I remember I was sitting there, I'm like, everything just unraveling and falling apart. It's like, where am I going to live? Who am I going to love? Where's my family? Where's my work? Where's my life? And there was a little gym down the street from where I was living, and I would just go to yoga. And that felt like a safe space. Like you said, I don't remember what the word you
presence,
used.
Space and presence.
It was like, you can come in here and no matter where you're at and just do all of it or none of it or some of it. But it kept me grounded and tethered and kept me breathing. Luckily, I had a little head start with those couple years of breathing, moving into that. And so that was quite a number of years of moving through that part in your 20s where you're trying to figure it out. Who am I kidding? We're figuring it out,
always,
right?
Yeah, but it's tumultuous when you're in your 20s. That's when it's, I think, scariest.
Yeah, but I can't think of a time in my life that coming back to the mat wasn't helpful. It always has been. I went through a really difficult divorce about 4 years ago. And again, you start to get to know yourself all over again. And you start to realize your capacity for being uncomfortable and what it means to still show up for your life and be kind when you are just hurting, right? And hold space for other people that are hurting, even when you're hurt. Like that there's enough to go around. There's enough grace to go around. But
do you find that through service to other people, it's easier for you to heal and let go of whatever it is you're
absolutely,
holding on to?
almost to a fault. I know that I definitely, in this process of Svadhyaya, have learned about myself that I don't ask for help very well.
Okay.
And so usually I can tell if I'm over functioning. I'm like, oh, what's going on? And so there's a balance there. I think that when we are in service to other people, you just realize the depth of how much you have to give. You can't feel depleted when you are helping someone else. It's just drawing from this well.
It's like infinite golden energy to love people, It really is. I mean, of course, there are people that take more than
absolutely.
They should. That's different. I'm not talking about...
No, not like emotional vampires.
No, not like that. And you get good at seeing those things as well and disconnecting. But when you're just giving just beautiful, loving service to people that really do need it, and it just fills you up. It just fills you all the way to the brim. It's like it's the only thing that really matters at all. It's why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's the reason I started this channel, is this sort of realization that nothing else was going to feel as fulfilling as reaching out and creating space for people that are going to need it. Because I needed it and someone gave it to me, and you needed it and someone made sure it was there for you.
Yep.
They say there's this idea. Again, so much of what I say, I don't know where it comes from. I just hear it and I take it and I love it. But there's this idea. Maybe it's from ashrams in India, but the idea is like when you start meditating, when you start becoming aware, everything that's not you starts unwinding, falling apart. Right,
falling
as you
away.
said, your life just scrambled, right? And now you have no center, or you don't perceive that you have a center, and you can't grab onto anything. You're awash down this river, and you don't even know what you are, who you are. And that's why the presence of the teacher is so important, because they don't necessarily have anything to teach you. They're just a rock for you to
like a touchstone.
Yeah, just hold on to for a second while your whole life is falling apart, while you don't know who you are, what's going on. There's somebody with gravitational weight that's like they're calm, they're centered, they're not worried about necessarily who they are or what they are. They're performing a service of love, and you can just cling to that rock, that service, that
Yeah,
love.
I think it's interesting that word cling always
Has a negative implication.
Well, just because like non-grasping is a big tenet, is a big function of yoga. Aparigraha or aparigraha means non-grasping, non-hoarding. I think that, as you're saying, a strong teacher gives you a sense of center, but the very best teachers are the ones that let you struggle and find your own center. And as you become a teacher, or I can only speak from my own experience, but becoming a teacher myself, that's a hard lesson to learn, to let someone struggle and know when to throw them a rope or when they need to go through this, right? Like not trying to save or rescue them or be their touchstone, but know that how it feels as a student when somebody has faith in you. It's like you're watching somebody struggle, let's say, to kick up into a handstand, and they're going, I can't do it. Like, I can't. And you're going, yes, you can. And they're like, but I can't. And you're like, no, I know that you can. Right? And they're looking at you like, how do you see this thing how do you believe this thing about me? But it sinks in. It's like with a little kid, right? Riding a bike or learning to read, all those things that somebody can teach you, but you still have to do the work and learn it yourself.
Right.
So I think there's a difference, I guess what I'm saying is between having teachers around you for different things and having like this like guru kind of worship. That for me doesn't resonate. I don't really find that helpful in the modern sense.
Absolutely. And I think that it's funny because the guru traditionally is really more of a con man. His whole from what I've learned, his whole shtick is that he, if you're a seeker, right, and you're like, I gotta get out of here, I gotta learn, how do I become enlightened? He goes, I know how to be enlightened, just follow me.
Right.
And then they give you these like impossible to answer questions, like what's the face you had before you were born? Or what's the sound of one hand clapping?
Right.
Right? They give you these things that you're like, all right, because the mind is always looking for the next challenge. What's the next
Something
thing I can do? Yeah. What's the next hill I can climb? And meditation and enlightenment are not accomplishments. They're just the opposite of having this feeling of having to go do things, right? Enlightenment is effortlessness. It is not this
from what I hear.
Yeah. But gurus know that a young mind or any mind is going to constantly be searching for the next thing to do. So what they do is they give them tasks that make no sense, that have no answer, and they basically let the person go drive themselves nuts trying to impress the guru, get the right answer, until the person says, you know what, you're a fake. You don't have the answers. Like, I'm out of here. And then the gurus, if they're a good guru, they're like, and you finally learned.
Right.
You don't need me.
These are like all the parables that we...
Yeah, exactly. Every story ever told is, it's always within you.
Right.
You don't need these other powerful things, this guru. Yeah.
It's interesting. One of the definitions I've heard for the word guru is one who sheds light. So in that sense, anybody can be a guru in your life. Even the people that just push your buttons, or that coworker or family member that just irks you and sets you off. It's like, that's shedding some light on something in me. So something that my teacher says is, thank you, I've just met my teacher. Right? So it's like,
wow.
When you're in those situations and you're like,
I hate
really
this.
triggered by something, or you're enamored, like, I want everything that this person has in their life. I idolize and want to be this. It's like, whoa, thank you, I just met my teacher. Right? anything that's grabbing your attention, you get curious about.
It's I always try to remember the things you hate about someone, you hate about yourself.
Generally speaking.
Mostly.
Yep.
And the things that you love about someone, you also love about yourself. You see
value
this higher person that you are.
Yeah.
That you just haven't let go of enough to become sometimes, you know? And I'm talking really like true, like the emotion of hate, you know, and the emotion of love rather than, you know, it's like there are certain people in this world that I find bothersome. I don't hate them, and so they're not they're not me. I'm not seeing something I don't like in myself. I just find them like detestable. But like things I hate, and I feel it, and it comes in me. I'm like, oh no, I'm looking at myself, and that's why I'm so angry at it. You know.
So there's a great yoga sutra, and I apologize to those of you watching who may know this verbatim translation better than I do, but one of my favorite yoga sutras is essentially cultivate happiness or joy for the happy, compassion for the unhappy, delight in the virtuous, and disregard the wicked.
Wow.
It's like how to maintain a calm, peaceful mind. So cultivating, like, be happy for the people that are happy, compassion for those that are unhappy, delight in the virtuous, right? Like, you're doing good things. This is a good thing to see. And those ones that you're talking about, wickedness, whether it's like really people that anger you or people that just irritate you, that's not within your sphere of your mind.
Right. They don't take up energy.
They don't
from you or away from you. Right.
The peace of mind, literally the
Right.
peace.
You're not saying that you're not going to stand up for what's right. You're just saying that whatever wickedness they're doing, you're not going to be sucked into.
Right. You stay in your lane, right? You do the best you can in your own life. And you're going to step in when you can step in to stop a wrongdoing or harm, obviously, right?
Yeah.
But
it's a very
getting
rare
yourself
occasion
worked
as well.
up over these people who have this negative energy
does nothing.
Generally just eats away at us.
Does nothing. And it takes away from the people around you that love you, you know?
Yes.
It's to me, it's very simple. If everybody just, like you said, stayed in their world and tried to make it the best world they could, if everyone did that, we would have there'd be no war. There'd be no suffering. There would be some wicked people, but they would be drowned out by all of the beauty.
The cacophony of beauty.
I
like the idea. I like the, so there's a yoga mat over here on the ground behind us in this beautiful space. So it's like, what is it, like 6 feet long by, I should probably know this, like, I don't know, 2 feet wide, something like that. And I like to remind students when they're in a yoga class, it's like, this is all you're working with right now. There's a whole lot of other stuff going on in this entire wide world for right now. Like, when we talk about staying in your lane, right? Like, you worry about you. You do you. This is all you have to worry about. And trust me, the other people in the class, they're only worried about their little space too. You know, people are like, I get so embarrassed going to yoga. I'm like, nobody's looking at you. Nobody's paying attention to what you're doing. They're all thinking about their own stuff, right? And so if you can kind of just clean up your own space and your own mind, even if it's just for that amount of time that you're on your mat or on your cushion, that's a good place to start.
I think that is honestly the one thing that I can take away from this conversation. I mean, there's so much wisdom that you shared today, but really, like, that sort of like just clean this up, take care of this. Yeah. And all of that energy and all of that presence is going to feed other people effortlessly. Yes. You won't have to go out and save the world or help people pick them up and drag them out of their sadness. You can let them be sad. And just by being a presence of light and good energy, people are going to naturally want to share that. And they're going to see themselves reflected in you and see what they can be.
Well, and you'll draw the people that you want to be surrounded by, right? Like, not every yoga teacher connects with every yoga student. It just doesn't work that way. And that's actually really relieving when you think about it, right? There's this like concept these days of like yoga celebrities, you know, these like celebrity yoga teachers with millions of followers on Instagram and all this stuff. And it's like, I don't begrudge anybody that. Great. Like that's the more people doing yoga, the better off we are. But the actual reality of it is like if I'm teaching a class here at Messiah, I can fit like 20 mats. Hopefully it's 20 good people that get something out of it that I also enjoy teaching and having in the room. Right? And the people that doesn't work for, find some other different, there's multiple types of yoga and so many teachers and varieties, and they find their thing. So it's not, you don't have to be everybody's guru. You just maintain your own integrity. And then, like you said, you provide a safe space for people, and then hopefully it also attracts the people that you want to surround yourself with.
The kind of people
without any judgment of the ones that don't. It's just, how much room do you have?
Yeah, you sort of, it really is this, and again, it goes back to enlightenment is effortlessness. It's this sort of like non-doing. I'm not trying to push away anyone or bring anyone in. Those things will just happen naturally as I'm just sitting here quietly in my own presence, quietly in my own space. Everything around you, it should be effortless. Everything around you is
should be.
It should be. It's not always, but it's sort of just, if you trust it, if you let go, if you keep breathing, the good things come, the bad things, they arrive, and then they just as quickly leave, like all things.
And it's your grip. It's going back to my love of sword fighting, right? They used to talk about holding the sword. You'd hold it like you would a baby bird. Right? You need a firm enough grip that it's not going to fly away, but you also can't crush it.
Wow.
Right? And so I think of the mind in yoga and meditation similar, right? You have to keep it reined in, but you also can't be too loose and it'll fly away. And it's like, how do you find that middle ground between attachment, like gripping in really hard, and aversion and pushing it away, where there's some ease and some grace.
Right. Wow.
Right?
No, it really well said, because it's like,
hopefully
it's attention to it, right? You're giving attention to it, but you're also not scared to lose it. You're giving it your effort, you're planting and working with the soil. You're not just disregarding it, but you're also not, scared that it's going to go wrong or scared that it's going to die on you. If it does, so it does,
right.
you
That
let it be what it is. You let, you're, and that's what breathe, we going back to breath. That's what breathing is this sort of like every breath is going to leave you, you're going to get one, but then it's going to be gone, and you just keep opening yourself up for the next one and the next one, so no, I love this, the grip is, it's sort of symbolic of like how we decide to treat people, you're not just being like, you're not saying to your sister, your mother, like, I don't care, you'll be fine. You're being like, hey, I love you. The grip is, it's there. Here's my presence.
I'm firmly here for you, but I'm not like, don't go, don't leave me, right? Because then what do you want to do? You're like,
I'm getting out of here. Yeah.
But if somebody's like, yeah, whatever, I don't care what you do, then that doesn't feel like love either.
That's
right?
not, yeah,
There's
right.
an in between.
There's presence,
Sounds so simple, but
I know. We're making everything sound too simple, aren't we? Yeah.
I think if we just admit that none of it's as simple as it is,
and
it is as simple as it is.
It's the weirdest split,
Yeah,
but, and
like
that's
I
part
said,
of it.
Good people doing our best.
Yeah, exactly.
Just keep showing up.
Simple enough. Good people trying to do their best.
Yeah.
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 I would love for you to tell everybody about your instruction class. Your certification class coming up.
Yeah, I would love to. So if you can see behind us here, this is Valley Spirit Acupuncture and Internal Arts in Beacon, New York. If you could see the windows out this way here, it's overlooking the most gorgeous, idyllic stream and waterfall. Anyway, this is the space that we'll be doing the training. It begins September 22nd of 2023. It is a 200-hour certification program through Yoga Alliance. So if you graduate from the program, you are certified through Yoga Alliance to teach yoga at the basic level. You don't have to want to teach to do it. A lot of people want to only immerse, not only, but primarily want to immerse themselves in the practice, in the study. And it is geared towards people that already have a life. Like I was saying about my classes, right? It's geared toward people that already have a family and a job and some pre-existing conditions in their bodies and aren't maybe as, sprightly and carefree and able-bodied as we all once were. If you are, that's friggin' awesome. Welcome.
Good for you.
Great, you know. I've got some great arm balances for you to demonstrate. But yeah, just I want to put it out there that this is a very inclusive program, teacher training program, and it really is about finding your own voice and your own unique style, both on and off the mat. So that's what I have to say. If you go to amadeiyoga.com, you can find out more. It's AMADEI yoga. And we'll see you this fall. It's 11 weekends spread out over 5 months, so it's pretty accessible. It's like 2 weekends a month.
That's great. That sounds so exciting. And I have some friends that are actually going to be part of that class as well, which I'm very excited for them.
We got a good group going so far. So
already some really lovely people are going to be part of that. So
and it's a small, I mean, maximum 10 people, ideally 8. I'll probably cut it off because you really do, there's a lot of sharing. There's a lot of time that goes into it. Gotcha. And you don't want to spread it too thin. So.
Well, that's so exciting. I'm so happy for you and your students.
Thank you. I am too. I'm really excited.
I think you guys are going to have a great time, and people are going to get a lot out of it. I just know it.
I hope so.
I'm just so pleased and honored to have you on the show today.
I am too.
And I'm 100% sure you're going to be back for another episode at one point. We
I
can
hope.
get deeper into some of these concepts. But thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you, Mike. I really had a nice time. Thanks for watching, everybody.
My pleasure. All right, guys. Well, we'll see you at the next one. Thank you so much. Have a great day.